All right, folks, I think we'll get going. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bradley Rodder. I think it's fair to say this is the best DiscoverMe conference ever. I'm here to give a little talk on the subject of growing interest and visibility, and that's Bitcoin. I'll start with a little bit of my background. I'm originally from a small state in the Midwest called Iowa, and began speculating in commodities when I was 15 years old. There's not a lot to do in Iowa. That led me to West Point to undergraduate school, University of Chicago for graduate school. And I came to Chicago to trade commodities. Commodities was, the birthplace was of course in Chicago. That's where futures and options and many derivatives were developed. And when I got to Chicago, I focused on a brand new emerging market, and that was financial futures. It was unknown at the time. Many people thought it was unnecessary, but to me it seemed like a very important commodity. The largest commodity of all, of course, is money. So as a pioneer in financial futures, I was at the right place at the right time and began making investments in hedge funds starting in 1982. There may have been someone investing in hedge funds longer than me, but I ain't met them. I was fortunate to sort of pioneer the model of taking venture capital stakes in hedge fund and staking emerging managers with capital to get their businesses going, and that turned out to be a good thing. So I've spent my career trading on Wall Street, LaSalle Street, and Montgomery Street. I live in San Francisco and now in the Silicon Valley. It's Thursday the 30th. I do not.
You can't question that, right?
Get off the
Arrow,
music.
bottom right.
So yeah, bottom right.
Bottom right arrow.
Oh, here we go. Okay. How many here in the audience own Bitcoin?
Own or no?
We're very honored to have a guest in the room today. Brock Pierce, one of the original pioneers of Bitcoin. Stand up, Brock. I switched to the Mac operating system about 7 years ago. It was kind of like having a sex change, but in a good way.
Try that arrow.
Just click the button.
The arrow bottom left.
Press mouse button.
Bottom left. Oh.
Did the arrow keep going?
The arrows are not working. Let's see.
Is it?
Yeah.
All right.
So the question that I asked myself, the chasm that I crossed when thinking about Bitcoin, was I asked myself this question: does the internet deserve its own currency? Of course it does. The internet doesn't stop at the UK-France border and transform itself. Bitcoin is the internet, and the internet is Bitcoin. It's protocol, if you will. Some call it a translation engine, but these features, I think, are the most important to think about. It is a cryptocurrency, and it is able to operate without a central authority of trust. I think that's fundamental. Obviously, no central bank is involved. That's another thing. As a currency trader for 35 years, I find it very appealing that there is no central authority, no ability for a Federal Reserve to print money. So I think these are the most fundamental aspects of it. It's open source, and it's so robust that the transaction costs of utilizing Bitcoin are almost non-existent. This is the price performance. In just the last year, it's gone up 50x in price, much more so than any other financial asset. Bitcoin is at the top. Had you invested $100 at the beginning of January 13 in Bitcoin, you would have ended the year with 5,000. Twitter, $231. Notice gold here. If you'd invested $100 in gold, you'd only have $80 left over. The reason the price is going up, and it's a multi-factor equation, but the main constraint of Bitcoin, and what has me and many other people excited, is that there's only going to be 21 million coins ever mined or produced. There's currently about 12 million outstanding. But that is unlike any currency in the history of mankind. Every other currency has basically had no supply constraints. That's why the price of Bitcoin could perhaps go to unimaginable levels as everybody on the planet, buys one or two to create normal commerce and to buy things online and so forth. But what's interesting about Bitcoin is that even if the price went to hundreds of thousands of coin or $1 million a coin, you could still use it to buy a double decaf non-fat latte. It's divisible to 1/100 million, which is a fascinating aspect. You guys are familiar with the fact that Bitcoins are mined. They're not created, they're mined. This is a Cirrus miner. It's basically a computer with some ASIC chips that this particular miner costs 6 Bitcoin. But there are tremendous operations in development whose sole focus is mining Bitcoin. This is an operation in China. A recent operation opened up in Iceland, of all places. Why Iceland? Iceland's rather chilly this time of year. And the process of producing Bitcoin takes a huge amount of computing power and lots of electricity. And by putting these computers in Iceland, they're naturally cooled, and they can lower their costs. The interesting thing about the network that I described earlier is that the computing power behind the Bitcoin network is now 800 times as large as the top 500 supercomputers put together. It's about 200,000 petaflops. That's a lot of computing power. That shows the power of what we have here. The genius of Bitcoin, from my perspective, is the structure in which it's built, and it's built on what's called a blockchain. Many people attribute the origin of Bitcoin to a Japanese student named Satoshi, who wrote a white paper, and then with a group of people began mining this currency and producing the currency. That's what some people believe. I think it could have only been invented by the NSA. It's a perfect currency. The development, the architecture is perhaps beyond one man. Back to the NSA, I'd like to say at least there's one agency listening to us.
In the room?
What is the blockchain? The fascinating thing about Bitcoin is that the miners, those who are employing that computing process power to do these mathematical equations and figure out a nonce which incorporates all of the transactions that have occurred before, what they're really doing is the accounting of the Bitcoin system. And they're paid to do that. They're paid handsomely to do that. There are about 25 Bitcoins produced every 10 minutes. And the people doing those calculations are actually keeping all the transactions organized and recording them, and they're paid for doing so. So it's a very interesting way to pay for the back office, if you will, of this currency. The interesting thing about the blockchain is that it will live for the rest of history. Every transaction that occurs in Bitcoin is recorded and available for all to see. So again, unlike most other currencies that we have experience with. What's it going to be used for? Well, we've been reading in the press about the Target problem. This credit card is 50 years old now. It's an archaic system of the transfer of payments. When I hand this card to a waitress in a restaurant, I'm not only giving up my private key, the number on my credit card, I'm giving up my private key, which is the 3-digit number on the back. A week after Target was needless markup. A week after that was Michael's. So we're seeing a continuous, we'll see continuous news now that I think will exemplify that the credit card system just doesn't work. It's old, it's archaic, it's expensive, and it's going to be replaced, in my humble opinion, by Bitcoin or other digital currencies. It's very easy to use. One way to transact a Bitcoin transaction is through a QR code. I was at a wedding in November in Sausalito and walked up to the groom and handed him a Bitcoin just with my iPhone. Bitcoin was trading at around $150 at the time. Currently, as of a few minutes ago, it's trading at $940. So it's been quite a substantial increase. Now I wish I had given the guy some silver candlesticks. Transacting in Bitcoin, as I said, is nearly free. Last week I saw a block of 10,000 Bitcoins go across, and which is about $9 million in value. Had that transaction taken place on PayPal, the charge to PayPal would have been $290,000 for that transaction. On Bitcoin, it was a couple of dollars. Fundamental change in the cost of payment systems. Overstock was in the news a couple of weeks ago. I thought this was one of the most brilliant retail moves that I've seen in a long time. The CEO of Overstock announced they were going to accept Bitcoin, and that day they got 830 new clients that they had never seen before. We spent almost $250,000 on Overstock. But it was a brilliant move because Overstock was plastered on the front page of every newspaper all around the world. It was just a brilliant move. Bitcoin is, you'll see now, will be permeating gambling. It's early days. This is a beta currency. Bitcoin is already being used. Again, early days in some of the gaming applications. People are able to bet one another that they can be the first to get to level 3, and the transactions occur in Bitcoin. It's, again, with very low transaction costs. It's going to be very interesting to see. But this is the most important thing I'm going to say. The fundamental value of Bitcoin is this. There are 6 billion people on the planet. There's hundreds of thousands of people in LA that don't have a bank account. They don't have a financial account of any kind. Bitcoin is transformational to those people. And I've been saying digital currency will have a greater impact on the developing world than anything since the water filter. That's pretty big. Oops. Already, I found this picture. 1/3 of Kenyans already have a digital wallet. Notice this taxi. You see the Bitcoin logo on the taxi? You can take a taxi in Kenya and use Bitcoin to pay for it. I believe that this is how future aid will be distributed to those 6 billion people without a financial account. Very efficient, very secure, and very cost effective. One aspect of Bitcoin that me as a speculator, I think about, black swan is a phrase that comes from the hedge fund world, which means a black swan shows up out of nowhere and causes an exogenous event that nobody had been expecting. Doesn't happen very often, but it happens. This is a very interesting period that we're in at the moment. I personally use Bitcoin as my money market fund. I despise the U.S. dollar, not politically or fundamentally. It's just it's lost 95% of its value in my lifetime, and I'm very young. So Bitcoin is in many regards, is a natural hedge for concentrated holdings in one currency. The world's changing quickly. I thought this was a fascinating one. China just eclipsed us now in e-commerce sales. What is the best currency to be used for e-commerce? Clearly, it's digital currency or Bitcoin. A currency war, in my opinion, is currently underway. It's at the very early stages. No one can predict what's going to happen. The Argentinian currency lost 15% in the last few weeks. It's a very unusual time right now. Many of the U.S. competitors, our enemies, shall we say, it is very much in their interest if the U.S. dollar loses its reserve currency status. Why? As a reserve currency, you're able to print it, as we were able to do in 2008. We'd be in who knows what state we would have been in right now if we did not luckily possess the reserve currency and were able to print it to bump up economic activity, stock prices, real estate, and so forth. A reserve currency is a very valuable thing to have. Now, one thing that you need when you have a reserve currency are things like a strong military, and you need a robust foreign policy. Our foreign policy right now is very unclear, at least the most unclear it's been in my lifetime, and that's I think bodes ill for the potential of the currency in the long run. This news is out today. Strange things are happening. China ordered its commercial banks to suspend cash transfers for 3 days and all foreign currency conversions. I've been traveling. I've not been able to get into this, but this is happening today. The interesting thing about Bitcoin is it's the only currency that I've ever dealt with that has a tendency to melt up instead of down. When Cyprus decided that they would abscond or take over the private savings accounts in the banks, that's when Bitcoin made its first new high. When people in Cyprus were just trying to protect their assets and buying Bitcoin. So it's an interesting world. On October 3rd, Russia confiscated all private pension Anybody see that? All of them.
Last year?
They just took them
And they just canceled their.
for the people's protection. And they,
This was last year?
and they put them all into Russian government bonds. Our government announced yesterday that there's a new savings plan now that will it's called MIRA, M-I-R-A, which will encourage citizens to buy U.S. treasuries. Very interesting. The reason I think about currencies all the time, I once did the largest transaction ever done on eBay. I bought $50 trillion Zimbabwe note for $9.95 free shipping. And I carried this with me at all times, just to remind myself of what a currency depreciation might look like. What most people don't understand is that the Zimbabwe dollar used to trade through the US dollar. It was more expensive than the US dollar, 1.7 to 1. Now I got 50 trillion of them. Zimbabwe recovers, I'm pretty well positioned. I've been trading gold my whole life, and that too has a fundamental part in your portfolio. On November 3rd, I was interviewed on Hedge Fund Radio, and I made Bitcoin was trading at $200 a coin, and I made a bold, brash prediction that Bitcoin would go to the price of gold, pause briefly, and then rally. And just out of complete coincidence, it did hit the price of gold 30 days later. Bitcoin rallied to 1,242. But I've changed my mind on something. My entire speculative career, I always assumed that the supply of gold was limited. You know what? I don't think that anymore. I've kind of changed my mind. And it has to do with human ingenuity and technology and Moore's Law. For example, when's the last time you heard of a dry hole in oil or gas drilling? Doesn't happen anymore. There are no dry holes. Why? Human ingenuity, 3D seismic. You can see the oil in the ground before you drill, and you drill there. Well, it's actually very, very similar with veins of gold and nickel. So gold is going to be easier to find using technology. Moreover, I believe in human ingenuity. I think that human ingenuity will someday cause energy prices to collapse. I'm not sure what that's going to be. Thorium, perhaps. When energy prices collapse, we'll be able to, in a cost-effective fashion, do desalination. We might need that in a couple months here in California. When you desalinate water, while you're going through that process, you can also separate the metals in that same procedure. There's gold in every tablespoon of seawater. So there's a lot of gold here. There's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin. Now, here's the strategy that I'm using to play Bitcoin. I believe that the currency itself is a substantial investment opportunity. But something exists here that in my opinion, has never existed in the history that I've read, and that is, I believe investments in companies that produce Bitcoin revenue have a very, very unique opportunity. And that opportunity is, if I'm right about that currency, that Bitcoin revenue has the potential of being multiplied many, many, many times as the price of the currency appreciates. And that didn't exist when we had the internet. You know, that the companies that would produce internet revenues would get lofty valuations, but they were all in dollars. This has that capability, plus the ability to magnify those as the currency appreciates, and I believe that it will. Many view this as, the best currency play of all time. Indeed, it might be, but I look at this differently. I think it's a cybersecurity play. As these Bitcoin become more and more valuable, people are coming after them. And those cybersecurity, those criminals have gotten very, very good. Every network has been penetrated. Everyone, including starting with the NSA. I've been focused on cybersecurity for about 8 years now, spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C., and was with Roger Cressy from Booz Allen. Roger said, we at Booz Allen are betting 1,000. I go, what do you mean by that? And he looked at me and he said, every single network that we've been asked to come in and evaluate has been compromised. So now that all the NSA information is already gone, you can bet that the cybersecurity's focus, the cyber criminal focus, is going to be on financial assets, and Bitcoin will be a very valuable financial asset and is subject to their attention, I believe. If you think about it, crime in cyberspace has unusual characteristics. For example, someone in Romania can rob a financial institution, a bank in LA, and without the pesky getaway problem. And that's what you're seeing here day after day after day. So one of the companies that I'm investing in is called Invincible Wallet. They're developing a new hierarchical deterministic wallet that has very interesting components. It has the ability to have sub-wallets and sub-sub-wallets, and is, we think, the most secure wallet possible. This is a picture of my son. I've been paying my son his allowance in Bitcoin, and the son of a bitch is rich now. But in the future, I plan to manage my Bitcoin long after I'm here. For example, if this money is programmable, the wallets can be programmable. So I'll be able to drop 100 Bitcoin in a sub-wallet that will be jointly owned by my son. And when I meet my early demise, that ownership will transfer to him, but I'm going to continue to manage it. I'll be able to say long after I'm gone, my son gets 10 Bitcoin every year, except for those years that he's had more than 2 moving traffic violations. And my wallet will check the DMV database and see if that's the case. That's pretty interesting. That's definitely going to happen. These Bitcoin will have some amazing impact, I think, on things like nonprofits. Across the screen here. So one of the things that Invincible Wallet has is the ability to do vanity wallets. And the wallet is a 32-digit string of characters that you use to identify you. It's your public key, if you will. And there's a way to use the hashing power that everybody's using for the blockchain and actually developing a wallet that has your name in the beginning of it. So that'll be very interesting for groups like Salvation Army. So you'll be able to recognize that wallet belongs to them. It was about 3 weeks ago. There was a guy on Bloomberg, one of the anchors, who was handing Bitcoin to one of his co-anchors on the screen at Christmas as a Christmas gift. And the guy who received the Bitcoin said, "Thank you very much," and he held up his phone. Somebody watching the TV screen grabbed that image of the QR code and emptied his wallet while the show was still going on. Again, this is a cybersecurity play. With the wallet that Invincible is developing is a receive-only wallet, which means you can't steal the money from that wallet. You can only send money to that wallet. So it's easy. Thank you. So it's easy to it's easy to fast forward and say, in the future, when a hurricane hits South Carolina, you can see somebody from the Red Cross holding up a wallet that will that will be receive only and be able to accept donations right at the very beginning. One thing with the Salvation Army, as I was thinking about this, I went on eBay, I saw a Salvation Army bucket, a stand, and a Salvation Army sign for sale for $19.99, free shipping. A spoof Salvation Army. I mean, how do you know if a guy in a Santa suit is really for the Salvation Army? With Bitcoin, it should be different. All right. So, another investment I'm making is in a company called Exclude. Exclude is technology that comes out of the world of drones to be able to protect drones from falling into the wrong hands. They have devised a very interesting way of using human beings as the authenticator to be able to authorize an important transaction. So it's really kind of back to the future, but a robotic piece of hardware, and this is literally a robot that's placed somewhere in a secure data center. And this robot communicates with the individual who's trying to authenticate a $10 million wire or recovering his Google password. And it makes outgoing secured conference calls to people that you've pre-authorized as your authenticators, your best man at your wedding, somebody that you went to school with. And it makes outgoing calls, and people, your authenticators, have to figure out whether or not it's you. And when they figure out it's you, they hit a button on their phone, and that's what will be used, in my opinion, to open and master a Bitcoin wallet, or to reset your Google password. It's what I call authentication as a service. The marketing guys are having a little problem with the acronym. This company doesn't use the internet. It's able to transmit information without using IP. They think that the internet's risky. Even with encryption, people have a false sense of security about using encryption and encrypted documents. The guys that are your adversaries don't need a Cray supercomputer to break your encryption code. They simply go get your keys, and most people keep them under the mat at the front door. So encryption is not everything that's cracked up today. If I wasn't bullish on Bitcoin before my trip to Malaysia, I came back even more bullish. I'm in Kuala Lumpur giving a keynote on cybersecurity, and I arrive in Kuala Lumpur, and I'm standing in front of the currency exchange, bulletproof glass. I hand my U.S. passport over to a guy who's literally glaring at my passport for some unknown reason. I'm buying Malaysian ringgits, getting my eyes ripped out from this guy. You never know how many to buy, so you buy too many. I'm back with the same guy 6 days later, behind the bulletproof glass. He once again is glaring at my U.S. passport, and he's ripping my eyes out again as I'm selling him the Malaysian ringgits that I had left over. Then I had to go through the same exact thing in Singapore. It's not going to be that way much longer, in my opinion. In my opinion, there's only going to be two currencies. Yours, whatever that is, whatever you get paid in, whatever your savings are, and Bitcoin. And the translations in the marketplace will be into Bitcoin. Right now, if a widget manufacturer is buying design in Italy and parts in Taiwan and labor in China and coding in Romania, it's just a spaghetti mash of currency translations that are all going on. That is all dramatically simplified by having one currency in the middle, particularly if that currency has a tendency to trade up. And I think this currency does have a tendency to trade up. Now, it's a beta currency. It's just beginning. It started in 2009. We have no idea how this is going to transpire. But the most important point I want to bring across today is that it's more than a currency. It's a system. It's an application programming language for money. And that has immense ramifications. For example, notary public. Bitcoin could replace the current notary public system, which in my opinion is broken. I went to a notary a couple of weeks ago that, to have a notarized document. The cost was like $80. The woman at the Kinko's pulled out the stamp from the right-hand drawer so it could easily be stolen by anybody. She casually looked at my driver's license, recorded the transaction in a notebook. Notarized the document, and then handed me the notarized document, and I walked out of the store. I could have easily unstapled that document and put another document on, and I would have had a notarized document. It's ridiculous. Firms like Invincible Wallet and others will be able to record in the blockchain that's recording every Bitcoin transaction. You can add a note to a Bitcoin transaction, which is a hash that points to a document store that's encrypted and cannot be altered. It's signed by both parties, and that document will live for the rest of time as being recorded on January 9th at 9 a.m. in the morning. That's how houses will trade, in my opinion, someday. All the title process and so forth that they charge thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for, those kind of things will be in the blockchain, and it'll be very, very powerful. Now, there'll be resistance. Governments are having a hard time figuring this out. Bitcoin is not good for government. If they figure out what it really means, it means people are going to buy, people are going to hold less fiat currency and more Bitcoin, and it will make it harder for all governments to print currency. I kind of look at the government as a giant hedge fund. Instead of 2 and 20, they charge 0 and 50, half of what you make, and they have great inclination to turn on the printing press and raise the price of stocks, raise the price of real estate. They get half. That's really the way it is. So I think you can expect to see government resistance, if you will. Governments around the world are trying to figure this out. I think that the main focus of governments is going to be to figure out how they can tax this. And it's taxable. It will be taxable. It's just like buying a used car for $5,000 and selling it for $10,000. You owe tax on that gain. It's the same with Bitcoin. But Bitcoin transactions can be quite anonymous if you choose so. Firms like Invincible Wallet are utilizing the Tor network to be able to hide the IP address of the transactions to reduce the probability that somebody can trace back a large transaction to your IP address and figure out where you live. Who's familiar with the Tor network in the room? Few. For those of you who are not, the Tor network is a fascinating invention of mankind. It was actually invented by the Navy many years ago. And the Tor network is a dark web. It's a parallel universe in which you can travel and not be traced. It uses encrypted hops at each time. It's very variable. And it's never been broken. Even when the Silk Road, which was basically an eBay for cocaine and young boys, operated on the Tor network. The Tor network never failed. It was a screw up guy on an email that he sent many years ago. He put the dots together, and he was arrested. But the Tor network is an interesting phenomenon in itself. and somewhat related, I think, to Bitcoin in the long run. So the governments, I think, will try to resist this once they figure out what it means for the currency. But my reaction is I think back to the last scene of Jurassic Park, life will find a way. They're as certain as the sun sets later this evening, digital currencies are with us. They're gonna change our lives. It's literally one of the most important inventions, I think, since the internet. And as I said before, it is the internet. Bitcoin is the internet, and the internet is Bitcoin. And I think it's going to have profound impact on all of our lives. So, those are the prepared remarks. I'll take a few questions if there are any. Yes, sir.
How do you feel the Bitcoin will continue to people, general users, will be able to use it? You mentioned earlier trust. There's no completely decentralized and everything like that. Is that really still true if the FBI has the Dread Pirate Roberts' full Bitcoin wallet, which is actually still currently the largest Bitcoin wallet? In addition to the fact they have all the previous emails sent over the Tor network as of a few days, or at least last week or something. So how does the trust translate with those variables in place now? How does the trust that's there at the moment go forward and make Bitcoin what it could be, right, from your presentation?
Well, the breakthrough of Bitcoin was this decentralized trust model where you and I have never met before. We agree on a transaction, and I give you 6 Bitcoin, and even though we've never met, it's a completely trusted transaction. You know you're going to get 6 Bitcoin. I know I'm going to pay 6 Bitcoin, and it's irreversible. And there's really never been anything quite like that. With regard to so that trust is different than I believe that the trust of that occurred in and around the Silk Road and the bust of that guy. The FBI is planning on selling those Bitcoin relatively shortly, as I understand it.
Oh.
So they're for sale. I can put you in touch with them.
I may want to know.
Yes, no.
Thank you.
If the chain of information that represents Bitcoin is the public key or is it the private key that's in the Uber mining computers? I'm trying to understand the private key, public key. Is an algorithm, is the private key an algorithm or a
It's an algorithm. With the new wallets coming out, you're actually able to generate a public key with a private key that's a one-way hash, so nobody else in the world can do that. And there are different kinds of wallets depending on what you want to do. If you want to buy and sell and transact, you'll have a certain kind of wallet with a public-private key structure. There's also the ability to have, a public wallet that you can put in your email address and say, "Send me Bitcoin." You'll see that on billboards. Did anybody see? There was a football game a couple of months ago.
I think I got 15 grand.
There was a guy in the stands who was out of money, and so he put his Bitcoin QR code on a sign and stood up at the football game and said, "Mom, send money," and he received $26,000. And none from Mom. He received $26,000. People were obviously supporting Bitcoin and talking their position, but people were sending him Bitcoin because he had a receive-only wallet.
They send it to him.
Sorry?
They sent it to his wallet?
They sent it to his wallet. So all you have to do is take a picture of that QR code. They saw it on TV, so they took a picture of that QR code and sent Bitcoin to that address. It's fascinating. really neat. Yes, sir.
This is more a personal opinion. Why do you think Bitcoin is going to be the winner? How Bitcoin is going to avoid becoming MySpace in cryptocurrencies?
Very good question. Because you've heard me say, I think Bitcoin is the internet. It's likely to surmise that it will evolve like the internet. I think it'll evolve quicker than the internet because we didn't have the internet when the internet was invented. So like the internet, there's 3 or 4 browsers. There's likely to be maybe that amount of currencies. Some of the cryptocurrencies, there's 69 at the moment. There won't be 69, but there might be 3 or 4. There are new currencies being developed that have different attributes than Bitcoin. I think it's Bitcoin's to lose right now. They've got a tremendous head start. It's already global. Bitcoin activity in China is 8 times what it is here in the United States. The Chinese are going crazy for Bitcoin. Why? They like to gamble. The Chinese have very strict currency controls. It's hard to get money in and out of China, and it's very private. The Chinese view privacy very, very importantly. So Bitcoin is like a perfect currency for the Chinese. The interesting thing about Bitcoin is that you no longer have to take money across the border. Your money is with you. It's with you in the cloud. So you no longer have to smuggle suitcases of money across the border. And so that's an interesting aspect of Bitcoin and the network effect of that. If one country decides to shut down Bitcoin activity, say in China, those people can just simply go to Thailand or South America and open up your Bitcoin wallet. It's where you are. It's what money should be, in my opinion. Very powerful. Yes, sir.
Does that mean that all the inheritance tax and stuff can get around that right now? I mean, if you wanted to, just give $100 million to your son and not be taxed at all, you can do that.
It's possible to do that. I mean, it's not a good idea.
No, but I mean, even probate and stuff like that.
I think the idea of life, data after death, to be able to manage your financial fears for decades after you're gone, people are going to get off on that. I really think so. I'm already working on schemes to torture my son as best as
Seems like you've already come up with something.
I've come up here.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
I heard today, and I don't know if this is correct, but Overstock had to take out a Lloyd's of London insurance policy, and I'm not sure if that's associated with their Bitcoin processing, but like I understand how merchants interact with it. However, I'm just looking from your standpoint, what risk, what barrier are we going to see before we start to see this mainstream?
Good question. There has been a transaction utilizing Lloyd's of London, but it's a different transaction. Overstock didn't do that. You got to hand it to Patrick Bryan, who's the CEO of Overstock. Heard about Bitcoin, figured out what it could mean to his business, and he got his lieutenants in a room and said, "You're not leaving this room until Overstock is able to accept Bitcoin." And they shoved pizzas under the door and made the guys stay in there. 10 days later, they began accepting Bitcoin. It was just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Then Tiger Direct did it last week. So you're going to see now. That's why I think Bitcoin is unstoppable. Even if the governments decide it's bad and they lose control of the money supply, all that's true. But at a certain point, it becomes impossible to stop. Life finds a way. I predict that you'll see purveyors of retail goods beginning to sell those goods at a discount in order to attract Bitcoin, in order to make it worthwhile for people to give up their Bitcoin in order to get a discount for a physical good. Why? If the currency does what I think it's going to do, those purveyors of retail goods are going to make way more on their currency than they make on their donuts or bagels or whatever they're selling. So I think you'll see a continuous stream now of announcements of new organizations accepting Bitcoin. The Sacramento Kings, is that a basketball?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There, go Kings.
I'm from Sacramento.
Okay.
I've actually never read a sports page in my entire life. I didn't even know that San Francisco was playing the city.
Neither have I. That's two of us.
So you'll see a steady pace of people beginning to accept Bitcoin. You know, this year I gave all my Christmas presents were handouts of Bitcoin. It's just people really dig it. People really appreciate Nolan Bushnell, who invented another asset class called gaming. You received some Bitcoin today. Was that your first Bitcoin?
That was my first one.
That was your first one.
Hey, when people give you money, you take it.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you for being here. Brandy Dale, Impact Investing with CSR Programs, the director of CSR for many different companies. Does Bitcoin have an incentive program right now for corporate social responsibility dollars to be granted into philanthropy?
No. No. But it will. When I think when the philanthropists hear the story, and I'm involved in helping tell that story to some of these kind of people, it really has a big impact. Bill Gates has done miraculous things in tuberculosis, for example, in Africa. He's really doing some great things. The most important thing, though, is when the philanthropists figure out how impacting this new payment transaction, this new payment mechanism is, it's transformative, just as much as a new tuberculosis drug, that sort of thing. It's quite special. Yes, sir.
Have drug cartels cooperated?
Yeah.
I was thinking money laundering.
Probably
It
already
seems like if you could get liquidity out of the system, it seems like a really attractive.
I'd heard that the $150 million transaction, which is the biggest transaction ever on Bitcoin, was probably California medical marijuana. That's what I heard. So that's,
The drug cartel leaders that I've talked with,
Yeah.
you know, Bitcoin can be pretty effective for hiding a transaction. But actually, Bitcoin is more traceable because of the blockchain and all the transactions are there. You can mask them and hide them, but the transactions are there. It's actually easier to trace in some degree than cash or diamonds. Just an interesting thing to think about.
It seems like a real, like, sort of a juxtaposition in terms of, you know, some of the selling point is like, this is decentralization, it's completely anonymous, you can't be traced, you have total anonymity in the system, but at the same time, you have by far the best ledger ever of transaction and you know, so I guess a lot will have to do with how the powers that be choose to try to, you know, push their weight and regulate and actually use that information, right, to see which direction that really goes with that, at least in the near term, the evolution of the, of course, I agree, the genie's out of the bottle, you're not gonna stop it, but it'll be interesting to see in the short term how that adoption takes place, you know.
Yeah, there were testimony yesterday in New York City in front of FinCEN, which is the U.S. Treasury arm that's in charge of currency and cross-border transactions. So there were 2 days of hearings on Bitcoin, and that's happening all over the world now. Germany just declared it as a unit of account, so that's equivalent to gold in the German eyes. And so everybody's trying to wrestle with this at the same time, but they'll figure it out. But it's unstoppable. That's how big it is.
When do you think there will be enough volume that someone can liquidate a reasonable fraction of $1 billion without crashing the market?
$1 billion?
Yeah, let's say you actually wanted to move a decent amount of money, like 100 million, and you're like, oh, now I need to use this, and I don't want to crash Bitcoin.
Well, it's gonna be here sooner than you think. I was with a hedge fund last week that had already amassed a position of $200 million of the currency.
Which you can't sell. I mean,
And they're planning on buying another 800 million, in
Have they already
the near
raised capital
future.
for that?
Sorry?
Have they already raised that?
Yeah, it's already, they own the coin.
What's their hedge?
Yeah. So, I come from the hedge fund world, and the hedge fund world, it's not even on their radar yet. It's in the last few months, they've started to see the headlines like overstock and so forth, and they're starting to look at it. But if you think about it, a hedge fund is supposed to hedge. I was in Chicago speaking with a group that had $80 billion worth of currencies, and they had never heard of Bitcoin before. I believe it's only a few years away, maybe 5, when all responsible money managers, a pension plan for the Teamsters or a hedge fund managing money for the state of California, they're gonna have 1 or 2 or 3% of their assets in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is non-correlated to all the other currencies in their portfolio. And keep this one thing in mind: there's never been a currency that's worked. Not one. And if there is going to be a currency that works, it's not going to be the dollar. It's not. It will not be the dollar. So that's why I think, from an institutional perspective, we're not there yet. It's just a beta currency. It's in the very, very beginning. But it won't be long before people realize that, a hedge fund who is supposed to be hedging is not really going to be doing their job if they don't have a little bit of Bitcoin exposure.
What's the market cap of all the Bitcoins?
$12 billion.
So it's still tiny.
Tiny.
I'm sure your question's better, go ahead.
Oh, no, my question's not better, I'm just saying that we can take this outside here.
Very good. Thanks.
Thank you guys.